Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday.
Hello.
I know it's been a. Oops, I got to mute. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Sorry. See, we got little tech difficulties. Hey, Taint. I know this is a really polarizing case because, I mean, sheesh, it's been what? I think it happened in 90, right? 93?
93, yeah.
Yeah. Here we are. How many years later? 30?
Oh, don't make me do math.
I know. I'm like, wait, no, it's so funny because I just said I'm going to take out my calculator because somebody will sting us on the math. Hold on. Yeah, we're at 29 years later and we're still talking about it. And there's still even new evidence that's been brought forth recently. The thing that, and as we go through the what happened in West Memphis and the trial and some newer things that have been brought to the courts, I can't help but think, even with the thumbnail picture, those 3 little babies just still have not received justice. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that there's a lot of differing opinions on who did what and who was involved, but in the end, I don't think there's closure.
Me either.
For those 3 little boys and their families. So hopefully we'll be able to, shed some light on for the people that aren't familiar with this. I will make a recommendation. If you got some time to kill and or you're looking for something to watch, the original documentary done by HBO is there. It's called Paradise Lost. It's actually a trilogy, a 3-part. And anybody that loves documentaries, if you haven't seen it, which I think most people that are really into documentaries have probably, in true crime especially, this is probably where they started. I feel like it's where I started. It's really well done, in my opinion. I know some people think it's biased. I disagree. I think it was masterful. I love how HBO was like, and this is like HBO when they were home box office. It's like one of their original pieces. Yes, the Alfred plea. Yep, and we'll discuss what that is and what that means. But it's one of those pieces where the thing that fascinates me about it most is that it's it's being documented in real time. Hey, Trashy, welcome. That to me is very interesting. Like, there's something about that changes the entire dynamic. Like, it is happening in real time for the most part. I mean, you're seeing things as they unfold. So,
and back really, then, that was a big thing because we didn't have YouTube.
Yeah.
To keep up with cases as they were happening.
Yeah, and HBO, I really think that can be attributed to one of their like greatest pieces that they've ever put out, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
In my humble opinion. And again, I always say though, just be prepared. The one thing that I wasn't prepared for when I first watched that was how graphic. Listen, there's no redacting, there's no blurring, it's very, very in your face crime scenes, photos, it's legit. Yes. Hey, Mo. Yeah, so this will be a good one. We're going to do like presentation style. Hope works really hard on putting that together for everybody. So we'll be doing our the presentation, and then we'll do some discussion. And then if we want to do like a panel about it, we certainly can. We were talking, we were going to do this live yesterday, but there was just so much happening on YouTube yesterday. Never mind the drama BS, but just with the Roe versus Wade stuff that, people really wanted to talk about that. And I think that was the priority. So I'm glad we were able to do this today because plus I feel like I like the daytime lives because I don't know. I have more energy.
Yeah, I do too. I feel like I was going to say less stressful. Here I'm stressed out, but that's just me. I do that to myself.
Well, yes, you do. You do. Yes, hit the thumbs up. I'm not sure. Thumbs up, not okay? I don't know what that means, Pecan. I'm confused. Oh, I see your previous comment. Well, thank you for stopping by. It's always good to see you. I forgot I'm not on the StreamYard side. I'm on the YouTube side. Let me pop back over here so I can, I don't know if which I always forget which side the delay is on. Is it on the StreamYard side or the YouTube side?
No idea.
So I think an interesting, I mean, I don't know. Should we, when you're ready, you let me know. But in the meantime, I mean, I think there's about 10 people here. So if you guys, I'm kind of curious to poll the chat, and I can wait to do this, or we can actually create a poll when I figure out how to do it. But I am curious to see where everybody's head's at. If you're familiar with this case, let's do this. Just put innocent or guilty in the comments when we're talking about the 3 boys that were convicted. Jesse Miss Kelly, Damian Eccles, and oh my God, isn't that terrible? I don't know why I always forget him. Isn't that awful?
Jason Baldwin.
Yes. I don't know why, like, his name doesn't stay in my head. That's awful. So, oops. Well,
There's the little tornado.
yep, she knows just how to make an entrance.
Okay. Just finishing this up.
Okay, so Ebony feels guilty. They says is guilty as his lies are long. So this will be interesting. I like when there's some, okay, I will give you some. I like when there's some mixed opinions because it creates really good discourse, and it creates, or a civil discourse, right? And creates good debate and talking points. So I like to hear if when we're done with the presentation, if we do a panel, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah,
or you could just do it from chat. I'm not pressuring you to come up on panel.
This is another case where there's just like so much that's every time I reread the details, I'm like, I don't understand how they came to this decision. Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think it'll be anybody that's been following this even as of late. Like, I was incredibly frustrated. Like, despite how anybody feels about this case, whether you feel they're innocent or guilty, why wouldn't they want, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but why wouldn't they want to explore that DNA evidence? Why wouldn't the system, the justice system want?
Well, because there's some statute that prohibits it, which is ridiculous.
I know, but there's workarounds to everything, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I feel like, again, what if, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'll stay quiet right now till we get to that point, because it could just, I don't want it to snowball. And I know how easily it is for me to start talking about something and then get off on a tangent.
Okay, I sent it to you.
Okay.
I kind of just put together some slides with a few pictures and like bullet points, and not really just to read line by line, but to kind of keep me on track of what happened when, because there was a lot. Excuse me. And then
It came to Naughty. I'm sorry, Hope. It came to Naughty Audie.
No, the 2 partners.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Gotta make sure I can get in there.
Put basket on my head.
No bug spray.
But anyway, just to kind of keep me on task and knowing what I'm talking about, so I'm not just rambling, because I do that too. Yes, Trashy, I'm going to give a timeline to start out of the things that happened. And I don't have everything. I realized after I did it, there's not like everything in there. There's a few things that will have to be discussed that aren't in the timeline, but I've got most things in there. My allergies are killing me.
Yeah, it's been a really terrible time for allergies. Are you? Do you want me to share screen as soon as it's up?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Sure.
It's just loading on my little Chromebook here. It's not the fanciest of laptops.
I know that's
Okay.
what I have to do. That's why I was like,
I know,
go faster.
yeah. Okay, so I'm going to share, and I'm going to pop back to make it full screen. If I can. There we go. And I'll pop it up like this. Can let me ask you a question. Let me close that little alert thing. I don't know what that is. So if I do view only, are you able to rotate your slides? Oh no, I have to request edit access. Okay, is this good for you, or do you want me to do something different? Like this? I've never did I apologize. I've never done it like with a slide presentation this way. So are you able to control the slides? Being it's up on StreamYard?
So. Let me see.
Give it a shot. Hey Kaiser, hey Trashy. Oh yeah, there'll be a recap. We'll do a full recap. If not, I'm gonna stay over here, and then I think with my okay, so oops, I could do it this way. Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
We're good.
I can't.
Okay, I'm ready. Or you're ready. Go ahead. I'm gonna mute.
Okay, you can click through to yeah. We're gonna talk about some stuff, so probably no child ears around. Okay, so we're gonna start. I actually, when I first got into this case, had no clue about this part. So in September of 1992, Damien Eccles, who's 17, that's who's in this picture here, was released from a psychiatric hospital in Little Rock, where he was receiving treatment for major depression. He was transferred there after incident at a detention center that included him attempting to suck blood from the wound of another detainee. Now, we've covered another case where we talked about vampirism, and this was something that they did. It didn't mean that they were Satanists. It was some weird belief system. So, and he was known already at that time to the Arkansas officials to have an interest in witchcraft, and they suspected he was involved in Satanism. And there's people that will argue this, but I think this was the time of the Satanic Panic. Right, Audie?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yes, this was like right at the end of the 80s into the early 90s, where a satanic panic, especially along the Bible Belt. And
Yeah.
I'm not making like a generalized, I'm not trying to stereotype, but I think most people will agree with me. Like the South, I mean, there wasn't nearly as much satanic panic in the tri-state area, like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, as we saw down below the Mason-Dixon line, and a little bit at Southwest. So yes, it was definitely during Satanic Panic, and we've seen just through so many other cases, well-publicized cases, what Satanic Panic did. I mean, it created basically like a witch hunt. No different really than if you look back in history where, people were villainized for what they look like. I mean, because that's really what it came down to. It was about like clothes and hairstyles and makeup and really, really crazy. But yes, definitely during Satanic Panic.
Well, and it was interesting in the notes that they took when they interviewed Damien that they were noting things like his hair. He had the letters that spelled evil tattooed on his knuckles. And so this is what he looked like. He wore black all the time. He wore trench coats. He had long black hair. It was shaved underneath. He wasn't the football player at school. He looked different. And, you go ahead. Look at those babies. Ugh. So, May 5th, 1993, at 6 p.m., this is when Chris Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch, they were all 8 years old, were last seen riding their bicycles on North 14th Street, headed in the direction of Goodwin. They're so little. Okay. I'm not going to read this like line for line, but these are just important events that happened. So May 5th was the following, well, 2 days later. Or the same day, I'm sorry. Good grief. 8 p.m., this is when John Mark Byers, and if you've watched the documentary, you know very well who that is, calls the police to report his stepson missing, and that's Christopher Byers. 10 minutes later, an officer shows up to interview Byers. Now, later on, Byers his story changes throughout. So at one point, he reports that by 8:30 p.m., he was searching the wooded area at Robin Hood Hills, which is probably not possible if he was being interviewed by the officer that quickly. And then by 9 p.m., Dana Moore and Pam Hobbs had called to report their sons, Michael and Stevie, missing. So between 9:30 and 10 that night, Narlene Hollingsworth later tells police she sees Damien and another boy, and they were both muddy, walking near the Blue Beacon on the edge of Robin Hood Hills. And the prosecutors are going to grab onto this and say that the murders took place during this time frame.
And I think, you know what? No, I'll wait. I'm going to wait.
Okay, so May 6th. So the medical examiner that autopsied the 3 boys, his time of death, he placed between 1 and 5 a.m. of May 6th. So not the evening of May 5th. And, it's not an exact science with medical examiners. There's lots of, they were in water. So there's lots of things that it was probably really hard to determine that. But this is what the medical examiner actually testified to in court. And at 6 a.m., Gary Gitchell, who's the chief inspector, announces the boys missing and that he's going to be in charge of the search efforts. And at 1:45 that day, they discover the first body of a naked boy in a gully in a wooded area of Robin Hood Hills. And by 4 p.m., the coroner has been on scene and pronounces the 3 boys deceased. So, May 7th. Now, this is kind of interesting because I don't really know. I think because of the past interactions with Damien is why they chose to talk to him. So Steve Jones, who's a juvenile officer, and then Lieutenant Sudbury question Damien about the murders, but take no notes of their interview, which happens a lot in this case. May 8th, Detective Durham and Investigator Griffith question Damien and Jason, and they tell them basically they've never heard of the 3 boys, didn't know them, haven't heard of them. May 10th, Damien, unaccompanied by an attorney, is interviewed at the police station by Lieutenant Sudbury and Detective Ridge. He then was given a polygraph exam by Detective Durham, and according to the notes that Ridge took, Durham, quote, reported that Damien had been untruthful and, according to the polygraph, was involved in the murders. That's putting a lot of weight on a polygraph exam for an 18-year-old. Correct.
And an 18-year-old that is already being questioned without any, I'm going to say adults, and there's a lot of preconceived notions and biases already for this in relationship to Damien. I mean, that's my opinion of it. Like, yes, he has already a history. He probably is, and again, I'm just assuming here that, for a kid that's been in trouble already for whatever reason, going into the police department again, or for whatever reason, I'm sure creates nerves as well. And I mean, we can do that another day, talk about polygraphs and why they are not admissible.
Yeah. They put a lot of weight on polygraphs in this case. It's kind of interesting. So I'm looking, and I don't have this on a slide, so I have the notes that they took during his interrogation. And so they really focused on, they noted he's very calm and even cold as he answered questions concerning background and knowledge of the homicide. Well, he didn't know the boys, so he's not going to be emotional, I wouldn't think. I don't think that's necessarily being cold if he seemed detached from it, because if he didn't know the boys, he's not going to be in there crying over it. I don't know. They focused on, he's a member of Wicca, and he told them his beliefs was, where there's a goddess, not a god. Everyone in the group works toward a divine light. Upon reaching that, they become gods themselves. He said he's been a member for about 5 years. There's one person nearby that's a priestess who worshipped cats. Okay. They noted a necklace he was wearing. I mean, this was the kind of things, which was a pentagram. And he explained that was a good symbol for Wicca. And I actually looked that up, and it is a encircled pentagram is actually a sign of security and the words are not coming to me. It is a good symbol in Wicca.
Yes, the pentagram has been misrepresented by history, right? Because it's been linked to devil, witchcraft, but there is history behind it that's accurate, and you've said it correctly. I think it's supposed to represent safety, security, and protection.
Yeah. So, he tells them that on that day he was with Jason Baldwin and Dominique Tier. Dominique is his girlfriend who was pregnant at the time. And said they'd gone to Jason's uncle's house, but they couldn't give a specific address. But they gave the general area where it was because he had to use a payphone to call his mom to pick him up. So he went somewhere with his parents and went back home and was on the phone until about 11:30 that night. Let's see. I'm not going to read that. There was some weird things brought up, and they kind of were asking questions that were weird. So they asked him what he'd heard about how the murders had occurred. And he said it was they probably died of mutilation. He said he heard some guy had cut him up. He'd heard they were placed in water and may have drowned. I mean, these are all things in a small town that are going to go around.
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing too. Like these are not, 10-year-olds. They're teenagers. Yeah. They're going to see things. They're going to hear things. Emily, we can talk about Aleister Crowley, when we get through the timelines, but it's definitely something worth discussing.
Yeah. And so they asked him if water had any type of meaning in the Wicca practice. And he stated that water was a demon type symbolism, and all people have a demonic force, and that everyone has control over their demonic force. They asked him how he thought the person had done the homicides. Now, to me, that should not even be asked. That's just like a leading, because he's heard things around town. they're asking him how somebody did it, and so he's going to give this to them, and they're going to run with it. He knows too much.
I also think, and again, this is based on my opinion, I mean, I think this was already a kid that was kind of we would call it like a shock jock today, right?
Yes.
He kind of likes the shock and the awe, and like
He
maybe
knew
people,
him.
yeah, like, and he kind of, the impression I got, this is my impression, that he liked to kind of come off as being spooky or weird. Like he
Yes.
enjoyed that attention. But I cannot stress this enough. Like people's quirks, okay, if we want to call it that, and maybe certain behaviors that maybe seem strange to one person does not mean that they are capable of murdering 3 little
Right.
boys or any other person. And of course, this is all going to come into play. And again, we're speaking from our position. I know there's a lot and we want to hear them all. But we're
Yes.
speaking, from our position of this.
Yes.
Just let me know when you're ready for me to move to. I don't think you did this one yet, right?
Not yet. Yeah. So they also asked him how he thought the person felt that had done the homicides. So he said they probably felt good about what they'd done, and he felt good that he had the power to do it. I mean, things that were, I just don't, these questions really bothered me when I read through them. So they talk a lot about Wicca. They ask him what his favorite book of the Bible is. And he says Revelations because of the story in it about what was being done by the devil and the suffering done by people at the hands of the devil.
Yeah, and this kind of sets up like a scene, right? So asking all these questions, which have absolutely nothing to do with anything, is just painting a picture for them to use, in my opinion, for the media and everything else going forward.
Yes.
Because people, remember, we were in the midst of satanic panic. If this was happening today, first of all, it would never happen because it would be like almost looked at as like a discriminating based on somebody's religious beliefs or whatever. But it really was done very intentional to paint a picture.
Yes. And like there was questions they asked him about his sex life. Just like what? So they asked if he would submit to having hair and blood samples taken. He did not object. They asked him about the polygraph test. He was very willing to do that. They asked if he considered himself to be intelligent, which time he stated he thought he was very intelligent. He had dropped out of school, but was self-taught, and that he was smart and more intelligent than most people.
I will say he's very, very well read. Even at 18
Yes.
years old, he was very well read and articulate.
Yes, and I believe that. And they were asking him that before the polygraph, like almost like they wanted to have that there in case he passed the polygraph, that they could be like, well, he's smart enough to trick the machine. I don't know. I didn't like it. Okay. So May 12th, police question Pam Eccles, which is Damien's mother, and she tells them the same story that Damien had, that night he was home with her talking on the phone. May 19th, they interviewed Vicki Hutchison, who is a private citizen, and I don't know what a volunteer detective is. I didn't know that was the thing, but she was conducting her own investigation of the case. So she travels with Damien and Jesse Miskelly to an SBAT, which is a gathering of witches, in a field north of Marion, where she sees a bunch of young people with their arms and faces painted black taking off their clothes and touching each other.
This Hutchinson is a problem.
Yes.
Because, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm stuck on volunteer detective. So
Yeah,
I would want to
why?
know that this volunteer detective is capable of gathering evidence, not contaminating it, asking it's so bizarre. Like volunteer fireman, volunteer EMS, all for it. Volunteer detective? I mean, that is so bizarre. That means I'm going to become a volunteer detective.
And looking at her in this picture, she looks, yeah. Yeah. So a big thing that's going to play into this, Jesse Miskelly has a developmental delay, and his IQ was somewhere between 67 and 75. So that's going to come into play when they're questioning him later. And we've seen this in the past, that when they start questioning people relentlessly that have this lower IQ level, they get them to say what they want. So Jesse's a neighbor of Hutchison's, and she used him to get in contact with Damien. So she says that at the Aspat, she asked Damien to take her home, and they left Jesse there. And this is very questionable given the fact that Damien didn't have a car and is never known to have ever driven one. So one of many things about her story that was questionable. So May 27th, they do a official police interview, and she tells them of evidence suggesting Damien and Jesse were involved in cult activities and the murders of the 3 boys. Now her son gets involved. So Aaron is her 8-year-old son. He tells the police that he and the 3 murdered boys often visited Robin Hood Hills together, and that they had at times seen 5 men sitting in a circle singing songs to the devil and doing what men and ladies do. So June 2nd, Vicky Hutchison does a polygraph exam, and police report that she was truthful. And to them, this is it. This is all they need. Which is ridiculous. Detective Audie, you crack me up.
Yes,
I mean, I think we could be better volunteer detectives.
That's what I'm saying. Like when it comes to fact finding, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I changed our screen because what was happening in full screen is some of the slide was getting cut off. And this setup seems to be the best where we can see your entire slide on YouTube. Because on the YouTube side, it was getting cut off a little bit.
That works.
So that's why I changed it.
I didn't know if it was me or what.
No. It was the format of the full screen, but we should be good now. It should allow for everything to be seen at this point.
So June 3rd, convinced by those polygraph results that they had their murderers, they bring in Jesse Miskelly. Now they tell him there's a $35,000 reward for information leading to convictions. In a polygraph exam, Jesse initially denies participating in satanic rituals or the murders, and Detective Durham tells another officer that Jesse is, quote, lying his ass off. So he came in at about 9 a.m, and they started recording the interrogation at about 2:45. So what was said before then, who knows? So by the time that 2:45, he begins to tell the officers what they want to hear, that he, Damien, and Jason committed the murders. The officers are still troubled by inconsistencies, such as Jesse was saying the murders occurred in the daytime when they actually occurred at night, and that they had tied the boys with rope when the actual murderer used shoelaces. But they worked to shape Jesse's story to match the known facts of the case. And so, 5 hours after bringing Jesse in, they start taping his confession.
And I think it's important to also, despite what people's opinions are on what may or may not have happened, the one thing I think everybody could agree on, and I'm open to discuss this as well, is that this entire investigation, the way the 3 boys were questioned, everything about it was so flawed. And I understand that we're talking about a small town in Arkansas that probably has never had a murder. But you know what? Then you call in help from either the Federal Bureau of Investigations or your State Bureau of Investigations, because I believe that if nothing else, this entire process was incredibly flawed.
Well, and another thing, Jesse, I believe, was only 17 at this time.
Yes.
And it's interesting because I have the transcript of their recorded interrogation with him, and they ask him,
right?
They give him his Miranda rights, but they're asking him to sign the form.
That's what I mean. It's things like that. Yeah.
Can we do that without a guardian there to co-sign or anything? I don't know.
Okay, I'm sorry. I switched.
Oh, you're okay. So June 3rd at 9 p.m., authorities appear before the judge to get search warrants for the homes of Jesse, Damien, and Jason. They get the warrants. By 10:30 that night, they're arresting Damien, Jesse, and Jason and charge each with 3 counts of capital murder. June 4th, 9 a.m., Gary Gitchell, I can't stand this guy, holds a press conference to announce the arrests. Someone asked how confident he felt about the case on a 1 to 10 scale, and he says an 11. And remember, he's basing this off the polygraph of Damien and Hutchison.
Yes.
Pretty much it. That's pretty much all.
And Miss Kelly, but when Miss Kelly gives his interview, I mean,
Yeah.
he can't even recall or give them facts.
Doesn't match.
What happened? Yeah, it doesn't match. Is this screen okay? I do have to step away just for a moment. Is that okay?
Yes.
I'm still listening. I have my earbuds in.
And Taint, I agree.
Not peeing if you hear that. It's my coffee. It's my Keurig. I just want to make a public service.
Sure.
It's my Keurig. I just realized how loud it sounded.
Taint, I agree. He gets under my skin. Can't stand him. So June 7th, a state judge appoints lawyers to represent each of the defendants, and June 9th, the police interview the 8-year-old Aaron Hutchison, who now tells them that he witnessed the actual murders of the 3 boys. I hate this. I feel like Vicky not only made up her story to pin the boys, but she drug her 8-year-old son into it. That really bothers me. Like, no telling what that lady told this boy. I don't know what all details he gave to the police, but it was enough that he shouldn't know. They actually had him out in the woods pointing things out, and it's crazy. That really bothers me. So I want to read something while waiting for her. Jesse says later, after he's in jail, he says of the interrogation, he kept telling Gitchell and Ridge, I didn't know who did it. I just heard about it, what my friend had told me, but they kept hollering at me. They kept saying they knew I had something to do with it because other people had told them. After I told them what the 3 boys were wearing, Gitchell told me, was any of them tied up? That's when I went along with him. I repeated what he told me. I said, yes, they were tied up. He asked, what was they tied up with? I told him a rope. He got mad. He told me, GD, Jesse, don't mess with me. He said, no, they was tied up with shoestrings. I had to go through the story again until I got it right. They hollered at me until I got it right. So whatever he was telling me, I started telling him back. But I figured something was wrong, because if I'd have killed him, I'd have known how I done it. And so that gives you a little insight into his brain. It sounds like once he told the story, he even was getting confused himself about whether he did it or not. Like, that's how, I hate to say low functioning, but that's how, I guess, easily persuaded he was. he's sitting there being yelled at and told that he did it, and people are telling them that he did it. And so he even starts to question himself, did I do something and I don't remember it? And that's really scary. Oh, I've actually got on some of these slides part of his interrogation, and the leading is terrible.
Oh,
There's
the leading's
so
really
many
bad.
things.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And I think this is a good example of why there's like we have created, especially in the legal system, like more of a there's vulnerable population, there's a protected class because they need support in situations like this. I mean, that's where that is warranted. It's so upsetting.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
The protected
You
class
hear?
got me.
Oh, I know. That's why I kind of dropped that little buzzword, because that's like an appropriate use of the word.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. So you discussed Aaron, right? Okay.
Yes.
Here we go.
Okay, so August 4th, Eccles, Baldwin, and Miss Kelly have a pretrial hearing before Judge Burnett, who I also can't stand. He rules that Miss Kelly should be tried separately, and later he allows the state to introduce Miss Kelly's confession, despite evidence that it was obtained under coercive circumstances, and that the defendants could be tried as adults rather than juveniles. And then he rules Miss Kelly's trial will be in January and the other two will be in February. And that's a big thing. He's letting Miss Kelly's confession come in, even though it's obvious it was coerced. And that's a big thing. And that they're tried as adults. So November 17th, divers are hired by the state police, and they search a lake behind the trailers where Jason and Damien lived. They find a 9-inch long knife with a serrated edge in the water about 50 feet behind Jason's trailer. And there's a picture of it here. December 30th, defense attorney Ron Lax interviews neighbors of the Hutchisons and is told that Aaron was at the trailer park at the time of the murders, not in Robin Hood Hills, witnessing the murders, as he'd told police. So here you have obvious his mom told him what to say. Oh, John Mark Byers. I love this picture. I had to get it because it.
Yeah, I'm glad you did.
him.
He's probably one of the most I don't know, I want to
Animated?
find the right word. Animated, interesting parts to this case.
He's a character. So January 26th, John Mark Byers, and this is the stepdad of Chris Byers, is questioned by police about a knife belonging to him. Now, he gave this knife as a gift to documentary filmmakers. Well, this knife was found to have blood on it that was consistent with that of Chris Byers. However, it was also consistent with John Mark Byers, even though they weren't biologically related. So they had the same blood type. And, why in the world you gift a used knife to documentary filmmakers, I don't know. That's John Mark Byers. He's just weird like that. With his comb over and his American shirt.
His American flag. And I mean, he was quite the character. Also, again, at the time, blood typing was the only forensic blood evidence that was available. I mean, there could be 2 people, there could be 5 people in the same home with the same blood type that are unrelated, right? So, yeah. I mean, that's loose, right? So that's not, I mean, we can't really use that now. Of course, the science is so much better.
I think his story was that he had cut his thumb with the knife or something.
Yeah, after, during, I don't know if he was hunting or butchering or something. I don't remember the details, yes.
And then decided to gift it. Okay. So, February 5th, 1994, a jury convicts Jesse on 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. and he's sentenced to 40 years. And the reason they're different, because in his confession, he says that one of the boys tried to run away, and he ran after him, got him, and brought him back. So that's why he has one count of first-degree murder for bringing the boy back to the murder scene, and then the other two were second. February 17th, 1994, after being pressured by prosecutors and receiving a promise that his girlfriend would be allowed to visit him in jail, Jesse says he'll testify against Damien and Jason in their upcoming trial. And he makes a statement under oath accusing Eccles and Baldwin of murdering the three boys. Well, the next day, Jesse changes his mind and decides he's not going to testify against them in the upcoming trial. Again, I feel so bad for him. I just think that he was so easily persuaded. And they knew that, and they offered him things and tried whatever they could to get him to go against his two friends. And at times it worked. Here, I think he had enough time to actually think about it and decided he wasn't going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that you hit the nail on the head with the promises, promise your mom can come get you. Let's just get through this. We just tell us what we need to hear. And then mom can come get you. You can go home. You can have dinner. You can go to bed. Like things like that when you're being interrogated for 12 hours
Yes. Well, because someone with a normal IQ, someone high functioning, if you're sitting in an interrogation room being questioned over and over again, it's going to wear you down. I mean, there are people that are normal functioning that end up giving false confessions just because they're mentally broken. Okay, so February 28th is opening arguments in Jason and Damien's trial. March 17th, jury deliberations begin, and March 18th, the jury finds Eccles and Baldwin guilty of capital murder and the deaths of the three children. So look how innocent Jason looks. He looks like just...
I know. I agree. He definitely has a childish look, and I don't think that alone certainly isn't enough to be okay, this kid didn't do it. But I don't know, you can't help but remember, I mean, if you were 18 years old watching this unfold, then maybe you'd feel differently. But now that we're adults and some of us are parents, and it's just very different, looking back at they are children. I don't care. I know by 18 you're an adult, but you're still learning and growing and maturing. They are children.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So March 21st, this was the sentencing phase of the trial, and they sentenced Jason to life in prison, and Damien is sentenced to death. They set the date for his execution for May the 5th. Jason is incarcerated in Pine Bluff, and Damien is sent to death row. In May, all three appeal their convictions, and obviously they didn't go through with the execution because he's still here. But February 19th, the Arkansas Supreme Court issues a decision upholding the conviction of Jesse Misskelley.
I just want to comment on this quickly.
Yeah.
Despite what people's different feelings are about their guilt or innocence, I think, again, kind of like how I said that the interrogation and the investigation is flawed. There is not solid evidence. I don't care who you are. We could pick this. We could spend 3 days picking this case apart. There is no evidence to support that these boys did it. Solid evidence that you're going to put somebody to death. You need to be certain. I'm sorry. Not circumstantial evidence, not polygraphs. We need to be certain if we're going to put somebody to death. And I think this is a really good example of abuse of the death penalty. And, when the top is too powerful, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, just think if they had actually executed him on May 5th.
Yeah. Yeah.
How terrible. Going off of 2 polygraphs and a coerced confession. Just wow. So 1996 is when Paradise Lost premieres, and the film does suggest that they were wrongly convicted. It does lean that way. Bella, sorry. Bella's top. The website westmemphis3.org, dedicated to securing justice, was established. And there's a lot of really famous people that jumped on board to this, and probably played a part in the money and things that they needed to get where they are. Actually, I know Johnny Depp has a matching tattoo with Damien.
Yes,
on
he
their
was
arm.
a huge support and voice and activist regarding this case.
Yes.
I wish I could just show you guys. I don't mean to derail for a second, but like, I don't even want to jinx it. I probably shouldn't say anything, but as you can hear, it's not too bad in the background, but there's a reason for that. If I showed you guys what she was up
What is
to.
she doing?
Is
it toilet paper?
It's not toilet paper, but it's a similar thing she does with toilet paper. She has taken all of the clean laundry that was folded in a basket and has created a path of clean laundry around my house. And she's hopping from one piece of clothing to the next.
Hey, if it makes her happy, not hurting anything. Besides, you got to fold it all again, but
yeah, it's not the worst. It's fine. Okay, I'm sorry. Back to the important stuff.
Okay, December 23rd, the Supreme Court upholds the convictions of Damien and Jason. So then we skip ahead a little bit. June 17th of 99, Damien files a petition for a new trial, and Judge Burnett denies it. In March of 2000, the second Paradise Lost comes out on HBO, and this film kind of leans towards John Mark Byers being the murderer. And I think the second one is where they bring out about the knife that was given to the film crew and the blood on it. February 2001, Damien's attorney files a writ of error. I can't read the rest of that. In the Supreme Court, arguing that Damien should not have been tried in 94 because of his mental condition at the time. And I don't know, he had been in the hospital for depression. I don't know what other diagnoses he had at the time. I don't think they did any kind of mental health exam before
There was
tried
no
him.
forensic mental health exams. I don't think on any of them, other than an IQ test, maybe on Miss Kelly.
Right.
It's
Which I don't think he knew right from wrong. I don't think it would have mattered, but
yes, I agree. Writ of error coram nobis, I think is how it's
Thank you.
Coram nobis. I'm saying nobis, but it could be novus. Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to sound fancy.
I don't speak attorney. We're just volunteer detectives, not
We're
volunteer
volunteer
attorneys.
detectives. That's right.
Okay, April 2001, the Supreme Court rules that Judge Burnett failed to give sufficient attention to Damien's arguments in his petition. So the Supreme Court sends the case back to Judge Burnett for further consideration of the issues. Now, why? Why
It's
do they not
impossible
just
for that judge to not have a bias at this point. I don't care.
Right.
I don't care how amazing the judge is. I don't care if it's the best judge in the world or the worst judge in the world. I have a big problem with this. It happens a lot in the judicial system. Like, why does it go in front of the same judge that has already made a ruling? They're never going to, I mean, for their pride alone, I can't imagine them being like, okay, I made a mistake. I mean, that's just not human nature.
Well, and here the Supreme Court's even saying, we don't think you looked at this right. Look again. Why would they not either make a decision themselves or send it to a different judge? Like,
I agree, 1,000%. If nothing else, a fresh set of eyes.
Yes. October of 2003, Vicki Hutchison does an interview with an Arkansas Times reporter and says everything she told the police was a lie, and suggested that the police warned her that if she didn't cooperate, that her child would be taken away.
Okay, this is huge, guys, because remember in the beginning of the presentation, a lot of weight was put into Hutchinson's testimony and her interviews and her volunteer detective status. So
Her
the
polygraph.
fact that she recants is huge.
Yes. This was a big, because it was the day after she took her polygraph is when they moved forward, or they talked to Jesse and then moved forward with arresting. So, yeah, it's a big deal. 2007, when the DNA collected from the evidence at the crime scene is tested, because there's ability to do that, none is found to match the DNA of Jason, Damien, or Jesse. And there's a hair found in a knot of the shoelace used to tie up one of the victims. And it was found to be consistent with Terry Hobbs, who's the stepfather to Stevie Branch. And that's the thing. I mean, a hair from home could be there. It was in the knot, like actually in the knot, though. So,
yep. And
John
it's
Mark
not
Byers,
even like it. Yeah, and it's not even like it could be because of like a familial DNA or genome, because it's his stepfather. It's not his bio dad. So there's
right.
no familial mix-up or DNA, like, where they meet a certain amount of the points, but they don't meet all of them because it's familial. Like, no, like he's his stepfather, not his bio dad.
I just find it hard to believe that if there was a hair somewhere on that shoe or shoelace, that it would have stayed on there and had the ability to get tied into the knot like that. Yeah,
I agree.
And at this point, John Mark Byers is now saying that he believes the 3 young men convicted are innocent.
And he was very passionate about this.
Yes. He was very passionate about them being guilty at first, and then became very passionate.
And I think because he's so eccentric that it was people, I will say this confidently, people didn't take him seriously, right? They kind of just thought of him more as like a loose cannon, I think, than anything. And plus he has a history, that's a whole nother thing. But he, I mean, the way this entire thing evolves is pretty wild. But
okay, July 2008, evidence surfaces that the jury foreman in Jason and Damien's trial discussed the case with an attorney prior to deliberations and advocated in the jury room for conviction. This is also huge. Like, this is jury misconduct. You're not supposed to talk about that case with anybody. I mean, you don't even discuss it with the other jurors until deliberations. You're not supposed to. So this is huge. September of 2008, Judge Burnett denies the request for a retrial, holding that the DNA evidence produced by the defendants was inconclusive because there wasn't sophisticated enough DNA testing to actually pinpoint that it was Terry Hobbs. It was just consistent with, it was basic DNA evidence. So that wasn't conclusive enough. November 4th, 2010, the Supreme Court orders a trial court judge to determine whether newly discovered DNA evidence or evidence of juror misconduct justifies a new trial or exoneration of the 3 defendants. So then August 19th of 2011, the Supreme Court takes a long time to deliberate things, so hadn't heard anything. And so this was another thing. A lot of people think that they took this plea deal because they knew that new DNA evidence would come back and convict them. But anyway, so Jason, Damien, and Jesse are released from custody following an Alford plea. And so, for people that don't know, an Alford plea is you plead guilty, you're maintaining your innocence, but you're basically saying that you know there's enough evidence to convict you if it went to trial. And I think in this case, they knew there's enough bias.
Yes,
to
I
keep
agree.
convicting them.
I don't think it even has anything to do with evidence. I think it had everything to do with bias and also the court of public opinion. They would never get a fair jury. They would
Yes.
never get a fair judge, in my opinion. But the Alfred plea is frustrating in the sense because I think if you really just okay, I'll find it. Okay, I'm sorry. Are you ready for the next slide?
Yes. Oh, CJ. Okay, and so this kind of brings us up to recently, a few days ago. So they were told that there was DNA evidence that had been destroyed in a fire. So they didn't have access to it. So whenever new DNA testing abilities came about, they did not think that they had anything else to test. Well, it was discovered that there was evidence that had not been looked at, had not been DNA tested. So on June 23rd, they requested a trial with new DNA testing of this evidence that had not been tested to exonerate him.
Okay.
And it was denied by Circuit Judge Tanya Alexander, citing a statute that says those petitioning for new DNA testing have to still be in prison.
Interesting. So here's the thing. Two things that stand out to me. One is that wasn't his attorneys originally told that everything had either been destroyed or lost, but yet it was still sitting in the West Memphis Police Department? Isn't that accurate?
Yes, they were told it was destroyed in a fire.
Yes. Okay, so that's number one. Number two. Now, this is just common sense to me, but maybe that's just me. If you were guilty, now you're out of prison, free and clear at this point. You've made a pretty successful life, okay? If you are guilty, would you be petitioning to have evidence DNA that we know is such a better sorry. What, CJ?
Right.
You just want to give me your garbage. Okay, thank you. Okay. Yes, she had a wrapper. All that for a wrapper. Would you want that to be brought to the court's attention in the justice system? I mean, come on.
No.
Come on, guys.
Well, and the sad thing about this is not just to say that he's innocent. It's to find who actually did it, because you can do DNA testing and find the perpetrator that actually did this, because these boys don't have justice. Whoever did this has not been punished.
Yep. And we were talking about, we kind of mentioned that, that the thing,
Tyler.
these three, sorry. I just went to say hi in chat, Tyler, and I didn't finish my sentence. That these three boys, believe what you want, but Eccles, Miss Kelly, and Baldwin maintain their innocence, and they are out of prison. And I don't know, it kind of shows me that Eccles wants to find who did this, right?
Yes.
And like you said, not just to clear his name, but to get justice for these three boys, whose, by the way, their families had a very complicated existence after this. And
yeah,
I mean, I don't know if any of their parents are even alive. I know two of them died, I think. I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to speak on that unless I know. I'll have to look it up. But
yeah, I know several have passed, but I'm not sure.
Yes. And but they have families, I'm sure, that want answers. And I just don't understand.
And DNA testing now is enough that you could test a family member of one of those deceased parents and find out that it was them.
Even for not prosecution purposes. I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, but I just don't understand why. I know that there's probably some sort of a loophole that could have been taken advantage of. But anyway, here we are. They're not in prison, so they couldn't bring it to trial or bring it to new evidence forward.
Now, the Damien's attorney says that they plan to appeal. So I don't know what grounds they're going to have to stand on if there's a statute, but I hope that that works out. Let's see. This, I'm not going to read all this. The basic gist of this was some of the evidence that was presented at trial. And this was Detective Durham's notes from May 9th, where he talked to Damien, Jason, and Dominique at Jason's house. And you have to remember, Jason was, he wasn't 18, was he? I think he was 17 also.
My understanding is that Eccles was the only one that was 18, but
That's what I thought.
I will confirm that momentarily.
So they were at Jason's house in the yard, and they come up and start questioning them and filling out a questionnaire sheet. And Jason's mom comes home and gets very upset. And he put in his notes that she accused them of picking on her son, and she didn't want them talking to them. He says, I attempted to reason with her, but to no avail, and we left. You better believe if I come home and find someone questioning my minor child about a murder, I'm going to be very upset too.
Of course. It looks like the two boys were 17 and Eccles was 18.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do that. I don't care if it's unofficial or what, you can't. And it was official. They were filling out a questionnaire sheet. So yeah, just some of the shady things that they did. So on the polygraph of Damien, in the pretest, he denied having been in Robin Hood Hills. He denied being present, denied having killed any of them, and didn't know who killed them. So the questions that they said he lied on were, at any time Wednesday night, were you at Robin Hood Hills? He said no. They said that was a lie. Were you present when the boys were killed? No. They said that was a lie. Did you kill any of the boys? No. Do you know who killed them? No. Do you suspect anyone of having killed those 3 boys? And he says no. And so Durham says it's the opinion of this examiner that this subject recorded significant responses indicative of deception when he answered the above relevant questions. Conclusion, deception indicated. And again, this is an 18-year-old boy who's being questioned about the murders of 3 boys and was very willing to take the polygraph, to give hair and blood samples. You know, he wasn't nervous about doing any of that. After the polygraph, he continued to deny involvement. After 45 minutes, I asked the subject what he was afraid of. He replied, the electric chair. A valid answer for someone who's being questioned about murders. He then said he liked the hospital in Little Rock, said he'd been treated there for manic depression. After a short period of time, the subject ceased to deny his involvement. And these are the actual notes from Detective Durham, and he puts in parentheses, this is admission through absence of denial. He then said, I'll tell you all about it if you'll let me talk to my mother. So they let him talk to his mother, and then he started denying involvement again. And I think that was definitely just he wanted to talk to his mom, and he used that to get to talk to her. After 20 minutes, I asked, you're never going to tell anyone this but your doctor, are you? And he replied, no. And that does not mean guilt. That means he may tell his doctor he didn't do it. I mean, that's...
Yeah, that can't be, like, that's really open for interpretation.
Yeah. But I love that they admission through absence of denial, because he quit answering questions. Okay. A little of this is Jesse's confession. And like I said, this recording started at 2:44, lasted till 3:18 p.m. He had been there. He'd gotten there about 9 a.m. So what happened between 9 a.m. and 2:44? What was said? And I'm not going to read all this, just the ones where there's red out beside it. Audie.
Yep.
So, of course, there's a lot of just general questions. And then you start getting into, they read the Miranda rights, like I said earlier, and he signed them because they keep asking, are those your initials? Are those your initials? He's 17. So, so they say, let's get straight to the date. Wednesday, early that morning, you received a phone call. Is that correct? And so these are the kind of questions that they're already starting to lead. And this is like one of the first questions because you can't, I don't care what they've said to him earlier. This is a interrogation and he said nothing about a phone call. Like they're just already putting that in there. Okay, you can go to the next one. And so he's explaining about where the woods were and he's using a lot of kind of stumbling over his words, and so they're leading him into describing it as a little patch of woods. They show him pictures of the boys, and he is picking out which one he saw Damien hit, and he picks out a boy, and he says it's Michael Moore, and it's not Michael Moore. It's I think Chris Byers, and they basically correct him, and you can go. Sorry. So at one point they say, so you saw Damien strike Chris Byers in the head. He never said where Damien hit. He had said he had seen Damien hit Chris, but he never said where. And Chris did have a skull fracture, so he had been hit in the head. So this is another thing where they kind of gave him that answer in their question. And he says he hit him with his fist and bruised him up real bad. And note that he says his fist, that he hit with his fist here. And then they talk about the location a little more, and the detectives is there a path that you go down? And then, he just repeats down a little path. There's a lot of that in this where he's just repeating what he's been told. And then again, describing the location, they are leading with what is around there. Now, this part of Jesse's confession is very, the story changes a lot about what he witnessed and when he left. Here he says he went after one of the boys and brought him back. And when he came back, the boys were tied up. Later, he says he was standing there until they tied the boys up and he left. And later, he says that he saw the sexual assault happen on the boys while they were tied up. So there's multiple inconsistent statements regarding this part. And then again, we're talking about, and these details are really graphic. Like, I hate it thinking about it. But this is another point where he described.
Do you want me to read? Are you okay with reading it?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. I didn't know if you needed a break because I know you've been talking so much, and I know this is upsetting, and I just didn't know if you wanted to read it.
Do you want to?
I could take over if you want. Yeah, I can take over. So the detective asked the question in reference to, and then they tied them, and then they tied them. Then Jesse's response, then they tied them up, tied their hands up, started screwing them and stuff, cutting them and stuff. And I saw it and turned around and looked, and then I took off running. I went home, and then they called me and asked me how come I didn't stay. I told them I just couldn't. Jesse later describes the cutting on the boys also, so he didn't leave as soon as they tied them up. So there's obviously, again, changes his details. I mean, when we're talking about such a horrific, graphic, monstrous crime scene,
yes,
I feel like somebody participated in it. If they were going to confess, they would know the details.
When there's so much repeating.
Yep. Yeah. It's like the question, the answer's in the question that they want.
Yeah.
Right? The answer they want is within the question. And again, we've stressed this over and over again about Jesse's IQ, about him being already there for close to 7 hours, being interrogated off the record. So who knows? Then we get into detective saying cutting him. These are the red is where Hope identified that there was some bleeding and such going on. Cutting him in the face. All right, another boy was cut, I understand. Where was he cut? Jesse doesn't mention another boy was cut, but he says he cut one of the little boys. This is a leading question. Gitchell now. Now you're talking about bottom. Do you mean right here? And I think this was in reference to
Sorry, yeah, you kind of have to...
Yeah.
They were asking where he saw him get cut, and Jesse's response was at the bottom.
Yes. Also, very leading question. When someone says his bottom, who would assume that means groin? They lead him to the correct body part that fits the crime. Jesse says yes. In the groin area, yes. Do you know what his penis is? If they have to question if he knows what a penis is, he probably shouldn't be getting interrogated. I mean, come on. Like, yes, that's where he was cut at. And if you don't know the graphic details to this murder, they're, again, quite horrific. And was that the last slide?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So if you don't know the graphic details to this murder, then I think that, it's very readily available. Like I said, if you choose to watch the documentary, again, I know some people feel it's biased. It obviously goes into details, and it was very heinous. What happened to these boys was
terrible.
Oh, I don't have words. What was done to them was horrendous. Okay. Now I'm going to, do you want me to drop the link?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. If anybody wants to come up, we can kind of talk about opinions, what different people, if anybody has an interesting point to make, anything that we left out that you think is worth discussing. There's a lot of information out there about this case. I mean, a lot. There's documentaries done by, like we said, HBO, but then there's also documentaries done which people believe makes the boys look more guilty. There's books, there's podcasts, there's just a lot of information. But in the end, I mean, I know how I feel, and I mean, of course, I know how Hope feels because we've discussed this in detail. In the end, I believe those 3 little boys still have not gotten justice.
Mm-hmm.
And as frustrating as it is, I wish that that DNA evidence would have been allowed in, because I think it would have given so many answers.
I'm trying to find. So there was something, there was a gas station or a restaurant nearby that they had someone come in that was bleeding into the bathroom that night. Why can I not find the details of that? I know I'm not making that up. Taint, I know you know.
Hold on, let me see what I have here. Let me see what I have in my little favorites.
It was a man that came in and used their bathroom, and he had blood on him.
Yes, let's see.
And that was never really looked into very good.
Now, I also think, let me see.
Oh, I found it. Sorry.
Okay, good. No, I was going to say, I think what we should mention after we go over this gas station is also what happened to Terry Hobbs's, to the boys' mom, Terry Hobbs's wife.
Yeah.
And all of that stuff that, just I want to touch on that briefly. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Share what you have.
Okay, so at 8:40 p.m. on May 5th, the police department, West Memphis Police Department, received a call that a bleeding black man had entered Bojangles restaurant, located near where the 3 bodies were eventually discovered. They said he'd been there about 30 minutes earlier and gone into the women's restroom. So an officer arrives on the scene at 8:50 and questions the manager. through the drive-through window. I don't know why that's important. They reported that the man had muddy feet, was wearing a white cap, black pants, had blood on his face and arm, and appeared mentally disoriented, but had left the restaurant a few minutes before the officer arrived. When they entered the women's restroom, they discovered blood smeared on the wall. The officer left the premises about 9 p.m. without ever setting foot inside the restaurant. All of this was just discussed through the drive-through window. The next day, detectives returned to Bojangles to collect blood scrapings from the wall. Unfortunately, the scrapings were never sent to a crime lab and were reported lost. No additional interviews were ever conducted.
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, it's just another example of like this investigation just being botched, in my opinion. All right, let's
I think
see.
they were just laser focused on.
Oh, they were definitely laser focused. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. And you know, the mutilation that was done to one of the boys, like, this was discussed in several different documentaries. It was very precise cutting, and there was no blood anywhere on the scene. And you're talking about, you're in the woods, you know, there's leaves, there's all kinds of
Yes, I want to touch on that.
around, and no blood.
Yes, there was, even when they did the reenactment of, like, even if the bodies were dragged, like, or moved, there was not a drop of blood.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how? So let me ask your opinion. Do you think the murders happened in Robin Hill, or do you think they happened somewhere else and the boys were dumped?
I think it happened there. The most recent documentary that I watched, they had a medical examiner look at the pictures, and he actually thought that the mutilation was from snapping turtles because they were in the water. And he showed some, like, pictures to compare.
Yes, I watched
other
it.
bites. Yeah.
Yep. Which I thought is very interesting, because that was also, like, a focus, was, like, how gruesome the,
and that it was
that
part
there was
of the
this
ritual.
Yes, that it was ritualistic, and that it was part of this satanic Wicca kind of cult ritual stuff.
Yeah.
When
the penis
yes,
is
I
a
saw
symbol
the
of power.
Yep. And I think that that's a reasonable explanation, you know. So, you know, Terry Hobbs, interestingly enough, and that's kind of who I think did it,
I agree.
is not like a stand-up citizen by any means. He's had quite the history himself, and you know, shot his brother-in-law, his ex-brother-in-law, I should say, and let's see if I can find the. And then something happened between him and, there's a really good, I'll share the link if anybody's interested. It's a, like, it has to do with what went on with Terry Hobbs and his ex-wife. He was, like, in a litigation with the Dixie Chicks. Like, he had, like, a lot of weird stuff happening.
Yeah, they went on stage and basically accused him
Yes.
of the murders.
Yes. And then, but I think he lost. Didn't he end up having to pay them like $17,000 or something? I think that's what it was.
I think you're right.
Pamela, let's see, shortly after the murders, the Hobbs retreated to Pam's family home. 2 weeks after the murders, Terry left Pam to stay in Hardy, Arkansas. By doing this, Terry avoided being brought in for questioning by the police. From the beginning, Pamela's family accused him of the murders. According to Terry Hobbs, his brother-in-law, Jackie Hicks, that's who he shot, by the way, had regularly threatened him for having killed Stevie. Their dispute came to a boil in 1994 when Terry struck Pamela, and Pamela called her family for help. Terry loaded his .357 Magnum. When her brother arrived, they began fighting, and Terry shot him in the gut. But then his brother-in-law died of complications from this gunshot wound. Yes. He also was arrested for some possession marijuana charges, which I don't even chalk that up to anything. Pam and Terry are divorced now. And Terry's name was removed from the stepson's tombstone. So I don't know. There's just a lot about him. Terry Hobbs described repeatedly searching the woods where the victims were eventually found. In one iteration, he described walking on the path that led to the ditch where they were submerged. In another version, he claims he never was within 100 yards of where they were found. Both Terry and Pam described being spooked when drawing near what would later be known as the discovery site. In his deposition, Terry described a bad feeling about the area and that he heard branches breaking. In his interview, there's a whole bunch on this. I just think that he needed to be investigated further.
Yes, and he had a history. I mean, he had temper issues, definitely. I think his punishment of the boys was pretty,
very severe.
Yeah.
And he had that pocket knife. Remember in the 2007 police interview, Terry Hobbs denied having the knife. In his Pastor deposition, he said he confiscated it years before the murders. Do you remember Stevie ever having a knife? I don't know if he got it at the Boy Scouts. Okay, and he goes on about that.
Coffee.
Oh, thank you. She made me coffee.
And you.
And Pamela had later testified or attested to the violent side of Terry Hobbs. So back to what you were saying, he was a very violent man.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hobbs was accused of molesting his son from his first marriage.
Yeah.
Terry Hobbs did not take a polygraph exam regarding the crime, and he refuses to take an exam or provide handprints or footprints.
Mm-hmm. He's very sketch.
Oh, and then this is a big one. Jamie Clark Ballard, a neighbor of Hobbs in 1993, along with two of her family, came forward to say that they saw Terry Hobbs with the victims at 6:30 p.m. that night. Hobbs denies that, saying he had not seen any of the victims that day.
Yes, I do remember that now.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The cumulative damning statements and physical evidence regarding Terry Hobbs makes it seem that it is impossible that he was not responsible for the murders. Among the most incriminating of evidence is his own testimony, in which he regularly contradicts himself and makes impossible claims. However, the hair matches for both Hobbs and Jacoby were one substitution from being perfect, making the evidence less conclusive. The DNA of a hair found on Christopher Byers' bindings has not been matched to anyone suggesting another unidentified perpetrator. While various witnesses placed the victims with Hobbs that evening, other witnesses placed the victims elsewhere, in the direction of Robin Hood Woods. And although Pamela Hobbs and her family have made accusations against him, Pam Hobbs has made vocal accusations against others, including the Moores. Still, these uncertainties can only explain away a part of the evidence against Hobbs. Now, if I'll put this link in because it's really interesting, and it just says like it compares Mark Byers, Terry Hobbs, and it's really good. I'll find it and put it in the comments.
Yeah.
Taint. So I'm sorry. His nephew, as in Terry's nephew, correct? I'm sorry, Hope. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. I lost my train of thought after I said something. Yeah, interesting. 2 weeks after the murders, Hobbs left his wife to stay in Hardy, Arkansas, roughly 130 miles away from West Memphis. This likely afforded him the opportunity to avoid police. However, after almost a decade and a half, on June 21st, 2007, Hobbs was finally interrogated by the West Memphis Police Department. A critical time period was constructed. According to Hobbs, at 5 p.m., he dropped his wife Pam at her place of work. Then, according to Hobbs, he picked Pam up from work at 9 p.m. and informed her that Stevie was missing. However, in subsequent interviews, he gives several versions, some impossible, of what he says happened between 5 and 9. He stated that after briefly searching the neighborhood with his daughter, he encountered Dana Moore, followed her home. Once there, he met up with Mark Byers in front of the Byers home just before 6 p.m. He claims that this was when the parents figured out for certain that all 3 of the children were together. The times presented for this meeting is impossible. Because I think the boys were last seen at 6 p.m., so they wouldn't have been meeting just before 6 p.m.
I put the link in the chat from Jive Puppy where the Hobbs versus Byers. Here you go, honey. Okay, thank you. Where they do like that side by side, and it's really good. I just thought it was a good source people may be interested in, and Hope did all this work, so I want to give credit where credit's due. Putting together the slide presentation and organizing the facts, because you guys, for anybody that is familiar with this case, thank you, CJ, knows how complicated and detailed it is, and she did such a beautiful job organizing it, and we could have talked about this for 5 hours, like no joke, like we really could.
Oh, yeah.
And you did such a good job at like putting it all together, organized, and not without a lot of fluff, which sometimes it's hard to avoid because there's so much to talk about, but you did it so well, so I appreciate that. You did a beautiful job.
Thank you.
Yeah, Taint, I agree on that. And again, I mean, isn't that like suspect in itself when somebody disappears like right in the midst of your child's murder investigation? To avoid being questioned. I mean, again, we're talking about a very different time. Like, it was pre-cell phone. Like, Well,
and he had a friend like David Jacoby that, if I'm remembering right, in the last documentary when they talked to him, he kind of was hinting that Terry did it.
Yes, and in that link that I shared, there's some talk of that, of Jacoby and his what he had to say about it.
Yeah.
So if anybody's curious, let me see if I can find it. I can share a picture. I don't see as much about or like Damien Eccles is very active on like Twitter and things like that. The other guys, not so much. I don't really see much about them.
Miss Kelly just got arrested.
Yes, he was like in a field or something.
But it was it was a bunch of traffic violation stuff.
Yeah. So it was like, hold on, I have a picture of Damien Eccles from today, which it kind of is interesting because I'm just like making a comparison. I know he's like buddies with Johnny Depp and stuff, but they just like kind of look like they look like each other. I don't know how else to explain it. Let's see if I can find it.
They look like they hang out.
Yes, like they kind of look like they would be like, I don't know, in a band together or something. Yeah, there's a picture of him today.
This is just another.
This was in 2012, actually. So this was actually 10 years ago at a.
Oh yeah, he's got like a beard and stuff now.
Yeah, I didn't realize this was such an old picture. Let me see if I can find a more recent.
This is just so much proof of how messed up the justice system can be.
Absolutely, and I think it's also a really great example of like the impact that stereotypes, using satanic panic, but like just like taking these maybe young people's way of expressing themselves or making them, they want to be individuals, like I kind of said in the beginning, I think he was kind of like a shock and awe kind of kid that, and he had made mistakes. He was far from innocent. There was definitely some things that he has done that are, or back then had done, that was unsavory. But I don't think that any of them support him becoming a a murderer. So, oh yeah, this is him today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you see, and his wife down here. So I do think, correct me if I'm wrong, did he not win? Did he sue the, I don't think you can sue the justice system, but didn't he sue and end up with some sort of a big settlement? I thought he did. Okay.
And I put ice in my
Was it the
cup and
city or the police department?
The city or the police, yeah, like something, I thought he ended up with, or all of them, not just him, ended up with quite the
you
settlement.
put in the cup. I have ice in my cup.
Okay.
Ice in my cup. I got a cup.
Sorry, I can't mute because my hands are full, so I can't. I apologize, guys.
Oh, you're fine.
She just wanted a juice.
Yeah, and
I
the
drink
fact
not
that
juice.
Damien had followed Aleister Crowley, that was a big thing they used against him.
Oh, yes,
and the
let's
music
talk on
that he
that.
listened to. The fact that he listened to heavy metal was something else they considered something bad. I'm trying to remember what all he had from Aleister Crowley in his room, but I know that that's...
Yeah, he had like a book, I think, or something. One of his like manifestos or something.
Too cold. I want to.
Yeah. And I don't know a whole lot about Aleister Crowley.
So I'm sorry, I was just before I was just supporting your about the Aleister Crowley stuff, and I just, if anybody doesn't know, Aleister Crowley was like an occultist. Let's see, I'm just going to look some information on him. Ceremonial magician, poet, painter, novelist, mountaineer. He founded the religion of Thelema, I think is how you say it, identifying himself as a prophet entrusted with guiding humanity into the eon of hours in the early 20th century. So let's see, I'm a poet and I like my lies the way my mother used to make them. That's just one of his famous quotes.
I got a cold, mommy. Mama, look.
Sorry. Was it The Great Beast? Is that what he wrote? Like where the 666 and all that stuff comes from?
I think so.
Yeah, like I think that's like been associated with him. He's been known as the wickedest man in the world. He's controversial. He wrote, widely founded his own religion order and designed a set of tarot cards that are still used today. I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of interesting information on him and how he grew up and the relationship with his family. He was, although impoverished, disgraced, and near skeleton heroin addict, Crowley never lacked followers. He fathered several children, most of them illegitimately, and was still in demand as a medium and magus to the end, designing a new sequence of tarot cards. So people believed in him. But again, like there's people that believe in freaking L. Ron Hubbard and aliens. Doesn't make them all. We may not agree with it, or I may not agree with it, or I may find it strange or absurd or whatever. But that doesn't mean that all of those people are psychotic or murderers.
Right.
Oh, Shelley, thank you so much for coming. I'm glad you enjoyed it. This is probably one of my favorite cases to talk about because there's just so much that we can discuss. And I do enjoy hearing different opinions about it. I know Ebeli, I don't know if I'm saying your handle correctly, but has an opposite opinion from us. So if they were still here, I was wondering if they were going to come up to discuss because based on the comments, they seem to think that the boys are guilty and that Eccles was more like, I'm just gathering from the comments, was kind of like a ringleader. And Baldwin, and that they convinced Miss Kelly to participate, basically. again, because he was like in a more vulnerable position.
Well, I know this is a very, boy, people either believe it or they don't. I know when someone else covered this case and I made some comments about it, talking about the men being innocent, I got attacked. I mean, people came in there and were so rude, because they believe differently, and that's fine. I mean, this is all our opinion of
Absolutely.
interpreting what we see, what we heard about it.
Yep, and I think it goes back to all the hard work you put into it, because it's like we form our opinions based on the gathering of information, right? And you gathered all that information and presented it so beautifully. And I think that, there's nothing like, in my opinion, based on what was shown today. Those were not tweaked, edited, spun. Those were just legitimately right from the case.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's just the, when I view the evidence that they used at the trial, my opinion is they got it wrong. I realize other people read it and see something different, and that's the beauty of America, but it can also be a very bad thing in the justice system, because I guess because we cover true crime and we see so many cases and how they turn out, we see cases that have so much more solid evidence and they don't get convictions. And then to see, as I'm going to use Casey Anthony as an example, I believe that they got that totally wrong. And I believe there was much more evidence in that case than there was in this one, convicting these men based off a coerced confession and some polygraph. There's no solid evidence. There was no DNA. There's no, I just have a hard time believing that two 17-year-olds and an 18-year-old left a crime scene that clean and quietly, and I just find that really hard to believe. But I feel like there was, especially to put someone to death, there was just not enough concrete evidence for me.
I agree. That was a great. Okay. I agree that the Casey Anthony is a great comparison, where there's just so much evidence to support, support that she was guilty, but yet here we are. And then you have something like this where this young boy is going to be put to death with all based on circumstantial evidence. It's just incredibly frustrating.
Yes. Yeah, it's, and it's scary. It's scary to know that you could be put in this position. If I have 3 boys and I let them express themselves how they want. 2 of them have longer hair. My oldest has several tattoos, piercings. So he's not the normal, I guess, cookie cutter society. He looks different. And to think that he could be accused of something because of how he presents himself is a very scary thing.
Do you think that we've evolved as a people since 1993? I'm sorry, guys, for the background noise. They're playing, doing a craft or something. But I feel like, what's that?
I think, as far as looks go, I think people are more accepting of people looking different. To an extent. Well, I say that, but I'm in a little small country town, and I can tell you the high school that my kids go to, everybody there drives pickup trucks and wears camouflage to school every day.
I mean, that's your, so I guess we all have what happens in our close little neck of the woods, where I'm in an area that's much more it's still pretty suburban, but it is more urban, right? So there's a lot of it's not as many, it's a small town, but we're very close to New York City. We're very close to Manhattan. So you kind of get that overflow.
So I think, if we had someone that dressed like Damien and had hair like Damien, he would definitely stand out in our community.
I think the difference is maybe that we're just, as a people, somewhat, it's far from perfect, but maybe more accepting of people's differences and people's choices, and people's individuality. So that, is something that's definitely gotten better with time. I was looking for, I don't know, when I'm on my laptop, it's weird. I was going to share some links, like for like Gen X. I was going to put my Naughty Audie link in, but I can't do it from my laptop. It won't let me, there's no link to copy. It's weird. So I may go live tonight on Naughty Audie, just for chit chat, but we'll see. We might do cocktails and chit chat. We'll see.
See how they go.
Well, for me, late's like 5 p.m.
Yeah. Me too.
5 p.m., 5:30.
Okay, well, I hope this wasn't like too boring. I don't like just reading, but there was so much I didn't want to forget to put in there that I made those slides, and I hope it wasn't too boring. And I hope it kind of gave everybody an overview of the case and the ability to kind of either look more into it or decide you don't want to look into it.
Yes, thank you everybody for coming. You did an amazing job. I think the presentation was perfect. It wasn't boring at all. I think you were right straight to the point. And you did a really good job at compartmentalizing the information so that it was the important, like you left nothing out that was really important, I think, for us to all hear.
There's just so much that happened and so many things, even after they were convicted, things that happened that I'm just kind of like, how, there are definitely things in the legal system, whether you believe them guilty or innocent, that need to be fixed. The whole Supreme Court thing, I mean, that's ridiculous. I don't care if they're innocent or guilty. That should have been handled differently.
Absolutely. The investigation, the interrogation, the use of the evidence, and even just like you said, like they were so hyper-focused, just exploring other options wasn't even within their like scope. Like they just knew that these boys were guilty and were not willing to entertain anything else. And that is so frustrating.
Right. Yeah, if y'all are interested and get a chance and want to look more into it, there's let's see, what is the name? If you search for West Memphis 3 under famous trials, they have so much information. That's where a lot of the transcripts for some of these interviews were. And the interrogation of Jesse's really interesting. It goes into a lot more detail. And then there's actually a second confession too, where they are having him correct some of the inconsistencies from the first confession. And there's so many things in there that it's really interesting to see how they led him, because it's just really interesting. You'd have to read it all. And I actually typed it all out. I just decided y'all didn't want to see all that. So.
Oh yeah, there's like a lot of visual, like evidence, I guess I can call, not evidence, but like things to show, but some of it is just too much.
Oh yeah.
I just don't think I think people will be triggered and it's like super upsetting. And some of it is like, you can't even get the image out of your head.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up for today and we'll let you guys know what we're going to be discussing next. Look out for the live. Make sure you sub. We are so close to 100. Are we at 100? Let me look. Did we get there yet? Let me go check.
We're 2 away.
We're 2 away? No, mine says 102 subs.
What?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yay! We broke the
Awesome.
100. We'll have to have a 100 sub celebration.
We're so pitiful. Everybody's like having their 1K. We're like, we got 100.
Yeah, we're gonna have we have our 100. We have our 100, so we're on our way there.
Yay!
We just need
We
to
may,
get that
like,
community
do-
tab.
We
But
may
anyway,
alternate and do like a case one weekend and then do
Yes.
like a social issue the next
Yes.
weekend and kind of back and forth.
Yeah, I love that idea. Like, yep, we'll cover our cases that we want to talk about and focus on, and then we'll throw some social issues or current events or anything like significant going on in the world of healthcare, any new like discoveries, things like that. We'll talk about it with you guys. But have an awesome day, everybody, and a great
Have a great
weekend.
weekend.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.